Welcome to the Bladder Cancer Canada podcast. I'm your host, Summer Stewart, volunteer with Bladder Cancer Canada. As the first and only Canadian patient advocacy organization dedicated to bladder cancer issues, Bladder Cancer Canada is proud to provide patients, their caregivers, and families with the support and resources they need to navigate a bladder cancer diagnosis. Through patient support, awareness, and research, our vision is to create a world where bladder cancer is just a memory. While Bladder Cancer Canada strives to support Canadians in their diagnosis and journey, we hope that anyone listening from around the world can benefit from these discussions and know we support you too. As a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended for medical advice. If you need medical information, please speak to your physician. Today, we're welcoming Ron. Thank you so much, Ron, for agreeing to be on the Bladder Cancer Canada podcast. I thought maybe we could kind of jump right into it, and you maybe could tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I grew up in Nova Scotia, joined the RCMP at the ripe old age of 19, and spent the next 35 years of my life in the RCMP. Was stationed in Ontario, in the Yukon, Nova Scotia, back to Ontario. As far as professional life, but what's probably more important is the fact that my wife and I had two wonderful children. Our son still lives in the Yukon, where him and his wife are vets, and I have a daughter who lives here in Ontario, very close to us, and she's a nurse practitioner, and her husband works in the university.
Oh, wonderful.
And on top of all of that, they have blessed us with 6 grandchildren in 5 years.
Oh my goodness. That is a blessing.
Yeah, we are very blessed. And as life progresses and things change, you only realize how important the grandchildren have become in your life.
Absolutely. Oh, well, congratulations. It sounds like you have a very lovely family.
Thank you.
Maybe you can tell me a little bit about what were the first signs and symptoms that led you to seek medical attention and eventually discover that you had bladder cancer.
We will have to step back to 2016. And
Okay.
Preceding up to that period of time, I've had urinary tract issues, the need to urinate often. I was treated for infections. There was always a trace amount of blood that they was detecting in my urine, but nothing that was visual by myself, which eventually led my family doctor to send me for an ultrasound. And at that time, they saw some shadowing in my bladder that they were concerned about, which obviously led to a scope. And when they did the scope, they saw what was considered suspicious tumors. That led to a TURP and confirmed that I had malignant cells inside my bladder. The recommended treatment at that time was to start BCG wash of the bladder.
Right.
And I did 6 weeks of that, at which time they did another scope. And the urologist at the time was quite concerned that he really could not get a clear picture of what was going on inside the bladder, and perhaps wasn't even sure that the BCG wash was having any effect on what he originally had seen. So his recommendation was bladder removal right at that time.
Oh, wow.
And recommended that if I did not like what he was suggesting, that I seek a second opinion. And we did. We took the second opinion.
Wow.
And
Okay.
when I went to the next urologist, he wanted to do his own TURP, and which time he took samples of the bladder and the suspicious areas. And he came back with a finding that there was no cancer cells at that time. So the recommended continued treatment was to move ahead with BCG. So for the next 3 years, for 24 weeks, I did a BCG wash of the bladder. The one thing that should be noted is during that time it was COVID and there was a BCG shortage.
Right.
And therefore I was only getting half dosages of the BCG wash. After that, there was constant surveillance being done with scopes being every 3 months. The bladder looked somewhat healthy at that time, and we moved to a 6-month schedule. And it was at the end of the second 6-month schedule that they discovered what they thought was another suspicious area in the bladder.
Oh, wow.
So now we're in October. Now we're into August, September of 2022,
Okay.
So this is 6 years after my original diagnosis. And they went in and did surgery, was only able to remove 70% of the tumor that they thought was suspicious because it had migrated into the bladder wall. The finding from that came back saying that I had muscle-invasive cancer in my bladder at that time.
All right.
They recommended that I go for a CAT scan to make sure everything was still contained inside the bladder. The CAT scan unfortunately revealed that the cancer had spread outside the bladder into the lymph nodes of the pelvis and was now in my liver.
Oh, dear. So the official diagnosis was non-muscle invasive bladder cancer with metastases. Is that correct?
In 2022. Originally it was, yes, non-muscle invasive bladder cancer. Yes.
Okay. All right. And then we went to muscle invasive bladder cancer.
Yes.
And then you were diagnosed with stage 4 metastases. And what were the options that you were given for treatments at that time when they found that, the cancer was in your lymph nodes and liver?
The recommended treatment, which we really weren't giving different choices. We were told what was the most effective at the time. And it was 2 types of chemo drug, the carboplatin and gemcitabine. And it was recommended that I do 4 cycles of that, which is 3 treatments in each cycle.
Okay.
The treatments started almost immediately, which we're very thankful for.
Right.
At the same time, the urologist was really upset that somehow this cancer had escaped my bladder under his surveillance, and was almost of the opinion for a while that my cancer in the liver was coming from some other location in my body. So they wanted to do a liver biopsy to get an understanding of whether or not it was cancer that had spread to my liver, or it was in fact liver cancer.
Okay.
The unfortunate part was the tumors in the liver was hard to locate and get a proper biopsy. They tried on 2 different occasions and was not successful. On the one occasion, which happened probably a month and a half to 2 months into my treatment, the person that was doing trying to do the biopsy looked at the different CAT scans that I had done and said that he was already seeing a response in my liver that was positive.
Oh,
that the tumors were already shrinking.
Okay.
And in fact, some of them had already disappeared.
Oh, that's wonderful news.
So this gave a really encouraging news to us and to my oncologist. At that time, he said that we would continue with the treatment plan, but would look at extending it beyond the 3 cycles to perhaps 4 or 5 cycles, or even 6, if my response continued to be the same. And it obviously did. We went from what was originally going to be the 4 cycles to 12 cycles, was it, Agnes? I can't remember.
8.
8 cycles. I'm sorry, we doubled up. I'm sorry, Summer, about that.
No,
so we went from originally what was going to be 4 rounds of treatment to 8, which in total was 24 rounds of chemo.
Wow.
And at the end of the 24 rounds of chemo, we had CAT scans, MRIs, PET scans, all during the process.
Right.
And everyone kept showing more encouragement that the cancer was actually receding. And at the end of my 24 rounds of chemo, the CAT scan that they did showed nothing in my liver and nothing in my pelvis.
Fantastic. Well, that's the best news that you could get.
To go from stage 4 to which prognosis was not that great at the time. I will clarify one thing that I never did. I never went to Dr. Google. I never went on the internet. I never asked any really detailed questions of my oncologist or the urologist. I never said, how long do I have?
Yeah.
I never said, what is the prognosis of someone who has cancer in the liver or liver cancer? I just had gotten into the frame of mind that give me the science, bring me in here every day, give me the whatever it is you have to give me to make me better. Mm-hmm. And I stayed very positive. I maintained hope. I did not let myself get into that rabbit hole that Dr. Google will let you go into if you ask too many questions.
Yeah, that can be scary.
And it was. Now, I'm not saying the people around me did not go down that path. And it was only after 2 years did I have a frank conversation with my urologist and my oncologist. My outlook was when I originally came in. And I was kind of shocked when they said, usually people in your situation has about 6 months. And I didn't even ask what stage I was at. It was only a year and a half after the fact that I was doing something with Bladder Cancer Canada. And the lady that was looking after it was filling out a survey and going through some general questions and asked me about what type of cancer I had. And I told her, and she says, "Oh, you're stage 4." And that was a year and a half after this all started that anyone in my circle even told me I was stage 4. I might have known in the back of my head, but I had never had anyone utter those words to me. And I'm kind of glad I didn't. I'm kind of glad I was somewhat ignorant of it all, because I think that really helped me in the long run.
Yeah, just kind of keeping that prognosis out of your mind and staying positive, that allowed you to stay positive.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I didn't have to dwell on a number. I just dwelled on, okay, I have cancer. That's serious, but people with cancer who in serious situations do survive.
Right. Well, that's a great attitude to have.
So what happened after we had these chemo sessions gone in my rearview mirror, we started on immunotherapy.
Okay.
And we went to Evalumed, was the immunotherapy that I was taking. It was every 2 weeks, so I was tied to the hospital. I had no side effects from the immunotherapy. There are many people who cannot withstand immunotherapy, but there was no side effects that I could not maintain other than maybe being tired on the day of and maybe some itchy skin here and there. But as far as it changing anything in my life, not at all. In fact, I didn't even know I was getting immunotherapy if it wouldn't be the fact of me sitting in the hospital, getting it every 2 weeks. And that started in the summer of 2023.
Okay.
And we were on immunotherapy right up until this past Christmas of 2024, at which time a decision was made on what we really need to do next. And there's a lot of things that happen during this whole immunotherapy process, and the fact that the PET scans and CAT scans and MRI were showing no cancer in my body. The thing that was still under investigation was my bladder.
Okay.
And because I had done so well on the treatment schedule that was given me, I had outstripped any medical knowledge of what the urologist or the oncologist thought should be the next steps. They had been to different seminars themselves where they had heard of situations like mine, but there was so few of us that there was no ongoing study. There were worldwide, there probably hundreds of us, but you need us all in one place to do a proper study on what do you do with a patient who was stage 4 and now potentially is looking at a stage 1 diagnosis. And it came to, what do we do about the bladder? And the bladder does not show up the same as some of your other organs when you're doing PET scans and CAT scans. Okay. It's the fatty tissue. The bladder is really hard for them to read and see exactly what is happening. So I was given an option of radiation, and with the understanding that they do not remove a bladder once bladder cancer has spread outside the bladder. But my urologist was encouraged by everything and said, let's really rethink this. Now that we're not showing you with cancer outside your bladder, I have not really done this in the past, but I'm offering you the opportunity for bladder removal.
Okay.
To attack the original site of your cancer. So you have to make a decision on whether or not this is something you want to do. At the same time, I was offered radiation. I spoke to some people through Bladder Cancer Canada who both went through the bladder removal side and also went through the radiation side. And I can't say that I was encouraged by either situation or something that I wanted to do. But as I went further down and did my, what I call limited research, I did not see taking radiation as an option. The long-term effects was something that I was concerned about. Not saying that bladder removal doesn't have some long-term effects.
Right. This is a difficult decision between the two, definitely.
But I was given the summer to think it through. And My oncologist was very encouraged by the fact that they would remove my bladder for me. The urologist did not pressure me, but said that he thought the best option at the time was bladder removal. So we did agree to do the bladder removal, of which happened this October of 2024.
So you're still with your second opinion urologist, correct? We're still
Yes, I am.
Okay,
I,
all right.
I never went back to the first urologist. I stayed at the second urologist.
Okay.
He is very renowned in urology. Plus, he also had access to doing bladder removal surgeries with a robot called Da Vinci.
Okay, all right.
So the robotic surgery is less invasive. The healing happens quicker. So that is what I did have that happen for me.
Okay.
After I came out of the bladder removal surgery, we went back on Evaluate Med. And as I said, that continued until Christmas of 2024.
Okay.
And that's where the Signatera program came into the picture.
Okay, I'm just going to pause you there. So going back a little bit, now with your urologist your discussion about removing your bladder, now, what was that discussion like and what diversion options were you given and how did you choose that?
The diversion options that we were given at the time really focused mainly on removing the bladder and give me a urostomy.
Okay.
That was the one that was put on the table foremost, I would say. We were also given the literature from Bladder Cancer Canada with all three different options.
Okay.
We listened to the bladder cancer webinar where you had three different people come on, one with each of the three different diversions. Listened to that podcast and came away with the feeling that urostomy was the best option for me.
Okay. Right.
And it was certainly the option that was supported mostly by my urologist.
Okay.
And that's what we did go with the diversion.
And how has that changed your daily life? And how have you kind of gotten used to that? Has there been any challenges or learning curves that you've had to deal with?
Well, the first learning curve was certainly that now you have an appliance that is attached to your body. And there's a learning curve on how to deal with that. The ordering of medical supplies, the changing of the appliance. The learning curve there was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Actually, within a month and a half, I was completely able to lock myself in the bathroom and do the change without any help me from my wife.
Right. Or even moral support.
Even moral support. It certainly has changed my life in the sense that, like they tell you about taking your bladder out and they tell you about having urostomy. They tell you about having the medical supplies. They tell you about all their but there's a whole pot of other little things, Summer, that they don't really get into because perhaps they have not walked the walk.
Yeah.
They are talking to you from a professional perspective where they have studied, researched, been involved in this. But until you actually go through life with no bladder and some other type of diversion, you don't know about all the wee little things that occur. And it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just something that you have to be aware of. And maybe if I would have been a bit more diligent in my behalf and asked some of the more in-depth questions from someone who has already experienced that, maybe I would have got some more information.
But how are you supposed to know what to ask if you don't know, right?
Well, I guess that's part of it too. The whole idea of that at nighttime, the nighttime issues of having a drainage bag when you go to bed versus, being able to think that the appliance will hold the urine that's produced during the night. That's not the case.
Oh, okay.
Some people said, oh, you probably won't, it's up to you how much you drink before you go to bed, whether or not you will need a drainage bag or not. No. And the bladder is not there. The filtering system that you have now, there's a lot more direct flow from the kidney into your appliance. So you have to be aware of where a washroom is every so many hours.
Okay.
That's just a fact of life. It's not like you're going to go 4 or 5 hours without having to go to the washroom. That doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
So little things like that, but they're manageable. What's the alternative? Having a bladder full of cancer that's kicking cancer cells out, or not having a bladder and having another diversion method that keeps you living?
Right. And some minor inconveniences. But like you said, it's something that is manageable and you learn and you just learn to live with.
Yeah, yeah. And as you go forward, I guess you will grow more into who you are than what you were.
Interesting. Now, you had mentioned the Sinatera program. Let's kind of jump into that. Maybe explain a little bit. This is the first time I'm hearing about it.
The Signatera program, I think it's the name of the company that oversees the program, and it's really a residual disease test that they do, and it's done by taking a sample of the metastatic tumor that was in your bladder originally, and they DNA that tumor, and then they take your blood and they look for the DNA sequence of that tumor in your blood.
Interesting.
Now, it's not a test that you can have unless you already had metastatic cancer. And so
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
want people to think that, oh, there's a Signatera test out there that I can go and get and see if there's any cancer cells in my blood.
Well,
So I
maybe one day in the future, but right
can,
now, yeah.
so that I can be proactive against ever getting cancer. No, it's something that is offered once you have got to a certain point in your stage 4 cancer journey, that they're not no longer seeing cancer in my liver or in the lymph nodes. When they did the bladder surgery, they took 39 lymph nodes out and not one of them was diseased.
Wow.
But my bladder was diseased.
Right.
So there was cancer still present in the bladder, which was kind of confirms the decision to take the bladder out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Signatera program, as I said, looks for these micro cancer cells in your blood, because the thought process is once you've had metastatic cancer stage 4, that there is cancer cells dancing throughout your blood system. So now they're looking to find these cancer cells and then decide what we need to do about that. My first Signatera test came back showing no cancer cells in my blood. The test is supposed to be 90% accurate. So the question then comes, is the immunotherapy any way masking what's going on?
Oh, interesting.
So why would we not step back the immunotherapy for 6 months and redo this Signatera test at the end of 6 months and to see if there's any difference in the results being off immunotherapy versus being on immunotherapy? In the meantime, we will do surveillance by having another CAT scan, which I'm actually going to be doing next week. And if this continues to show the same type of results as the first Signatera test, then we will continue this on a regular schedule for the next several years. And if we can ever make it to the 5-year mark, the oncologist says I would probably have to tell you to go home and that you're cancer free.
Wow.
So it's a long journey still. We don't know for sure whether or not the immunotherapy was doing anything to the blood, but I was also given the option that at any point in this 6-month period that I'm not having immunotherapy, that if I was really, really uncomfortable, he would put me back on immunotherapy immediately. That he did not want me to feel that I was risking anything by being off immunotherapy that I was not comfortable in risking.
Amazing. That's a fantastic support and fantastic option. That's wonderful. And, the role of the healthcare provider is crucial in a cancer journey. How would you describe your interactions with your medical team and what made those interactions special or challenging?
Well, we were blessed where we went. The cancer team at the chemo suite that I was part of or have been part of for the last almost 3 years, I could not ask for a better group of nurses. The support team there, the volunteers in particular, what they do for you each time you arrive there and look after you, and actually they almost become members of your family to some degree. The oncology team outside of the chemo suite, again, unbelievable support I had. I know there's a lot of challenges about the medical system in Canada and in many of the different provinces. It seems to be the same. And I know the challenge at times is getting through that front door. But I was lucky I got through the front door, and the treatment I got once I was diagnosed, I can do nothing but brag about how well I was treated and how I was never felt that there was a challenge for me. Yes, there were all kinds of side effects throughout the chemo, and there's little bumps in the road, but those were nothing to do with the personnel. That was to do with the medicine side of stuff. The personnel, exceptional.
That is something that I hear a lot about in these interviews, and I'm so proud, even though, like you said, we do have, flaws in our medical system here in Canada. I really do believe that the cancer system is second to none. It is a wonderful system, and our support staff, the nurses, the oncologists, and like you said, even the volunteers are all extremely lovely. And it really takes a special type of personality to do that every day, all day.
Well, and there's a lot of those volunteers in particular, they're volunteering because they've lost someone to cancer.
Yeah.
And every day that they come into that chemo suite or the cancer center, they're kind of reminded about what they lost, but yet they're still there helping out, doing whatever they can for the next person who's fighting that disease.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you're going to make me tear up here. You're so right. Very special people. Bladder cancer can be a physically and emotionally challenging experience. Would you describe some of your most significant challenges you faced during your treatments and your recovery?
I think during the process of being diagnosed, the different scopes I had, and even the TERPs that I had when they went into doing surgery on the bladder. Every time they did one, and I don't know how many, I've had 6, 8 maybe. It seemed the healing was that much more of a challenge.
Oh, okay.
There was lots of visits back to the ER to have catheters reinserted, trying to get the bleeding under control. Those were the challenges dealing on that side of it. The challenges of dealing with chemo is no different than anyone else who goes through chemo. There's going to be the low hemoglobin. It's going to be the change in lifestyle. I'm a very active person. I mean, up until the morning I went and told that I had cancer in my liver, I was out doing my 5-kilometer jog. I golf. I play pickleball. I play basketball. I do all those things. I still do some of those things, but cancer has taken, and chemo, I would assume to some degree, has taken some of that energy away from me.
Okay.
Maybe my age has impacted some of that too. I find it a little bit more challenging to be doing the level of physical activity that I did prior to the chemo and the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But that again it's something that it's manageable. You learn to do less with what you have. You got to sometime, what's the saying with the lotto? Know your limit and play within it. And that's what I have to learn is certainly, as far as lifestyle change, I will tell you that we have not changed. With our 3 of our 6 grandchildren being in the Yukon, we travel there 3, 4 times a year. We've continued to go on vacations. We've gone on cruises. We've gone to Hawaii. We've gone to Mexico. We've done that stuff. We refuse to let cancer rule us. We work around it, in between the 2 weeks that I have to be in the hospital. We'll go on a trip. I've been able to miss 1 or 2 rounds of immunotherapy when it was scheduled every 2 weeks, much to the concern of my oncologist, but we did that. So yeah, we and I will say, like, in the middle of all of this, I was getting pretty beat up by the chemo, and the oncologist said, "Hey, we need to take a couple-week break here. We need to get you back in somewhat stable ground." And in that 2-week period, my wife booked a trip to Vancouver, and we rented a house out in Kisilano. And my son came down with his kids from the Yukon, and my daughter came out with her kids from Ontario. And we spent 7 days doing things around Vancouver. And that was probably one of the best things that we could have done. It really kind of reinvigorated me to get back and said, okay, let's get into this second phase of chemo. And if I was feeling all right after this and getting the results, just imagine how good this is going to be when I get the next dozen or whatever it was left rounds of chemo under my belt.
Wow.
So I really encourage people in the middle of this, if you at all have the ability to stand up and say, okay, I'm taking a break and I'm just going to go change the scenery. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a big trip or whatever, but just change the scenery of going, getting chemo, coming home and laying on the couch and turning the TV on. Just change that scene.
And it sounds like you've got wonderful support with your family. Did you have a caregiver? Was your wife kind of that person for you?
Yes, and I can't say enough. She went beyond and above, and I know she probably put up with a lot of things that, you do question stuff, and think that I was, a smile on my face the whole time I was going through this because I thought I was going to beat it is not the case. You have a lot of dark thoughts at times. You do have a lot of, down periods, but she was always there. She made sure I never missed an appointment. She was the one that was more concerned at times. She used to call the chemo suite when things were not going very well, with whether it was the low hemoglobin and the need for blood transfusions, or the blood clots and her having to give me 2 needles in my belly every day, or it was collapsed veins and finally getting a port in so I could continue on the process. She was always at the forefront of that. I would sometimes, and she'd get upset with this because she would call the chemo suite and say, "This is what's happening." And then the chemo suite would say, "Oh, can we talk to Ron?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, how's it go?" "Oh, good, good." "I'm okay." And she would be so upset because she knew that I wasn't okay.
Right.
But I had this underlying fear, Summer, during the whole process. And it's a visual thing that certainly sometimes is more overpowering than what the reality that you're facing.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife's brother at age 31 died of cancer.
Oh, dear.
And to see what he went through the last several months of his life in a hospital bed, I had this underlying fear that if I went over to the hospital with any of the things that was happening to me, that they were going to keep me. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you can't keep me if I'm not in the hospital.
Right. Oh my goodness. What a strategy.
They're not going to get me, and even I had one situation where I had this low hemoglobin. It was down in the 50s. And I couldn't get upstairs. I had no energy at all. And I went over for my blood work, and I was sitting downstairs waiting for my appointment to go upstairs to see the oncologist. And the nurse in charge of his office called and said, "Well, where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm just downstairs. I'm coming up shortly to see the good doctor." And she goes, "Get on the elevator. Don't you be taking the stairs. I'm sending a wheelchair." And I said, "No, I will make it to the elevator. I'll get to where I have to get. No, you're not putting me in the wheelchair." And then when I get up there, she says, "Here, you got to get in this room. We got to put you on a stretcher. We're taking you to the blood transfusion unit as soon as they get your blood ordered up." And I said, "I will lay on the stretcher." But I said, when the time comes for me to go to the blood transfusion unit, I'm walking.
With 50 hemoglobin. Oh my goodness.
They were just like, she was just kind of like shattered that I would continue to try to walk. And I made it. And then she goes, "Most people with your hemoglobin are dead."
Oh, dear. Oh, my goodness.
Like smiling. And she said this, but I said, "No, like I am stubborn." My biggest fear, Summer, was that I was going to end up in the hospital.
Yeah.
And if I'm not going to beat this, then let things be. But I don't want it to be in a hospital bed somewhere. That was a real visual thing in my head that I just couldn't get past. No, but as far as my wife goes, every meeting, and this is really important to anybody out there who is about to go down this unfortunate path, is that second person in the room is so key.
Yeah. Because
lots of times I did not hear certain things. Not that my hearing is bad, though my wife says it is. It was that, the doctor says one thing and you're kind of focusing on that, and that they have a limited amount of time with you. They move on very quickly, and you're still kind of lagging behind in what the doctor may have said. Whereas that person in the room hopefully is hearing it all. And my wife made copious notes all the time and asked a lot of questions. A lot of times my daughter listened in remotely because she's a nurse practitioner and she had her own issues and concerns. She's also would raise stuff with my wife that my wife would take back with her to the oncologist. So that person is not just there to drive you or, go get you a coffee while you're sitting in a chemo chair, but also to be that advocate for you and ask the right questions, take the right notes, and be active in the whole treatment process. It's key.
Absolutely. And I think that's what really, makes a caregiver as opposed to just a support system. A caregiver, like you said, isn't just somebody to drive you and get you coffee and make you dinner. They're the people that really are listening, They're the ones that go to the appointments. They hear everything. They talk you through things when you get home. They're the ones that call the chemo suite when things are going on and you don't want to admit that things are going on. That truly is a caregiver. So it's wonderful that you had such a great support system. Are there any other ways that you've suffered, say financially, professionally?
I'm very lucky in that. Obviously, I'm retired. I've been retired for 15 years. So there was no financial burden when it came to loss of salary because I could no longer work. That was not an issue. The medical system here in Ontario has paid for everything that I have had so far. They've even paid for the Signatera program, which is only recently has OHIP approved the use of that program for certain types of cancer, and I did qualify. So yeah, financially there was no burden. Yes, we had to drive a bit further. There's the cost of parking, maybe meals away from the house because you're not home at a certain time. But those were all ones that we were able to, to bear without any really financial concerns to us. And I'm very thankful for that because I sat in the chemo chair not too long ago getting immunotherapy, and the gentleman beside me was facing a financial difficulty because he could no longer work, and they had not figured out yet how workers' compensation was going to help him financially.
Oh dear, yeah.
And it kind of leaves you man, like we just took this for granted. I didn't have to worry about any of that stuff, where so many of the people who are not in retirement age, like I was, face a financial burden when they have to go through this process.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear that you weren't affected too much in any way, except for maybe, how you play pickleball.
Yeah, well, there was a period of time where pickleball was not at the forefront. Even after recovering my surgery, they told me it'd be 5 to 6 months to recover from bladder removal. And I was back at pickleball in 3 months.
Oh my goodness. You're amazing. That is stubborn. But I find that the most stubborn people are sometimes the most successful when it comes to treatments and getting better.
Well, yeah, I do have a hard head.
Let me ask you, how did you find Bladder Cancer Canada?
Actually, it was not until we went to the second opinion urologist when we were in his office, and the day that we were leaving, he provided us from Bladder Cancer Canada.
Okay.
And then when we came home, my wife went on to the Bladder Cancer Canada website, and we've been part of that, I guess, since the summer of 2017, it would have been.
Wow.
We did the bladder cancer walk a few years back, had my daughter, our granddaughter, and her husband, and Agnes and I. We've listened to several of your webinars when they were talking about my type of bladder cancer and how it was quite a large percentage returned within 5 years. And I just didn't want to hear that. However, that gentleman that day was quite accurate. My bladder cancer certainly did come back in the 5 years, just like he said it would. So
interesting.
But I didn't want to listen to the whole thing. I just wanted to be one of those guys that, no, that's not going to be me.
Yeah.
But
absolutely. That's, sometimes you got to block out anything that's going to deter you from acquiring your goal of getting better. And
yes,
whatever that is, and we have all these great resources, but if you find that it touches a little bit too personal, it's really nice that you can just shut it off and save it for another day if you need to.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I did. But having said that, he was quite accurate with his information that day.
Right.
In my case, anyway. But, you talk about lifestyle changes, and of course, there is less physical activity than what was in the past.
Mm-hmm.
The whole washroom thing, again, living where we do here in Ontario and whatnot, you're never far from a washroom. It's not like I'm living in the outback somewhere north of the Arctic Circle.
Right.
And if that was the case, I don't really have to look for a washroom anyway.
Yeah, well, you've got other solutions out there.
Yeah. So, some of those things that you see as a challenge is sometimes is a challenge in your head more than what it is actually a challenge in reality.
Right. It's more of, an adjustment as opposed to anything else.
Oh, most definitely. And the thing about it all is, don't get me wrong here, I still question whether removing my bladder was the right thing. It has been done, and I realized the bladder had some cancer in it, but was it such that we could have done something to keep the cancer inside the bladder and let me live with my bladder? That is something that I have moved off. I have not moved off from yet.
Interesting.
But I can't go back.
Right.
I mean, I can only go forward. But
Right.
It's human nature to question ourselves in many of the decisions that we've made. Not that we can change the decision, but we just question whether or not that was the decision that was right.
Right.
As time goes on, I'm sure as I move away from what life was into what life is, that question will become dimmer than what it is today. But I certainly do still question whether we could have done something with the Signatera program earlier to see whether or not there was anything in my blood before we took the bladder out.
No,
I don't know.
that's understandable. You always wonder if you've done the right thing, especially with such a large, heavy decision to make. I mean, I don't envy you to make that decision, nor do I think a lot of people would want to make that decision. And I think that's, human nature that you question, did I make the right choice? And could things have been different?
The whole cancer journey, I've talked to 2 different people or 3 different people in the last couple of weeks who have reached out to me because they're in a difficult cancer position, and just kind of wanted to pick my brain on what things did you find that worked for you during the process and what things should we really stay away from. And it's easy for me to say what worked for me, but it's really hard sometimes to say whether this is viable for you. I can only give you what worked in my situation and my experience. There are some certain things like the caregiver and the notes and being, having someone there with that second person with you throughout the whole process. Of all the things that we've done, of all the things that happened, that second person is probably the most important thing outside of actually the drugs going into your system. Mm-hmm. That is the most important thing that occurred for me during my journey.
Right. I know that there are people out there that don't have support. And I'd like to take one moment for the listeners. If you don't have support, please get in touch with Bladder Cancer Canada. Bladder Cancer Canada is a wonderful resource with people such as yourself advising people who are facing the journey alone. You're not alone. There are people out there who have been through this, who have advice. And so if you're feeling alone, you're feeling like you don't have anybody there, please get in touch with Bladder Cancer Canada. We are here to support you.
And I can add, not to that in particular, but for myself, is that after this whole journey thing and it's going to continue, it's going to continue for the rest of my life. I understand that. You do become more appreciative of the simple things in life. And you try not to let those little things that upset you or got you off your game, just let it go by. It doesn't really mean a whole lot.
Yeah, it's amazing how things become very, very trivial after you go through something so emotionally debilitating in a way.
And I just want your listeners to understand that I'm not sitting here today talking to you, or I guess in them, saying that, look at Ron, he beat cancer, because that's not my story. I'm not bragging that, I'm maybe ahead of the game. I'm humbled at the fact that I have been able to go down this path and get the results that I have gotten. It's not about me beating cancer. It's about the fact that I've had success with the support and the medical team that has helped me get to this point in life. Mm-hmm. So I'm not ringing any gong saying, look at me. I'm not, I don't want people to think that I'm bragging. I only want people to be encouraged that what happened to me can happen for them. And that is really, the message that I would love to be able to get through to people, that there is hope out there. Don't give up. There's so many things happening in treatment with genetic testing that there is much more hope in the fight against cancer than there ever has been. And to a certain degree, which was explained to me very early, is that we're going to try to teach you to live with cancer. Mm-hmm. Cancer is going to be like a chronic disease, no different than somebody with heart disease or diabetes. We may never, ever cure you of cancer, but we certainly can extend your life and teach you how you are going to live with cancer. So I certainly have developed the motto that, yeah, cancer probably or maybe will get me one day, but it ain't getting me today.
Yes. Yes, I love that motto. And, I think that kind of speaks into my next question, being about how, has the disease influenced your outlook on life and relationships and future goals? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that as to what you're looking at now?
Looking at now, living life as normal as what a retired old fart does in Canada. Being able to have those moments with family,
Yes.
to be able to appreciate and see your grandchildren grow. One of the biggest fears I had when I first was diagnosed was I have all these young grandchildren, and am I going to see them grow? And today I feel that, I'm going to see them grow for a while.
Yes.
And that is probably one of the single biggest things that I appreciate about the whole process. So yeah, your outlook is on life is changed. It's changed in the fact that I may not have unlimited time, but none of us does.
Right.
I understand that part of it. But I would like to think that I have more time than maybe I thought I had when this all started. And that's what keeps you going.
Absolutely. Well, you look fantastic, Ron. I wouldn't imagine that you had ever gone through so much. You've been through so much, and you don't look sick. You don't look like you've had cancer. I mean, you look wonderful. So
it's interesting that you would say that because I never felt sick. I felt sick when I was having chemo because of what the chemo did to me.
Mm-hmm.
I never lost weight. In fact, during chemo, I gained weight. I never lost my hair. Maybe I got a little bit paler looking at times.
Right.
And people used to say to me, "You're the healthiest looking cancer patient that I've come across." So
no kidding. I bet everybody in the hospitals were just in awe. Like,
yeah, like what are you doing here?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But no, and I guess I was blessed that way. Like again, it kind of made you think, am I really sick?
Yeah. But I think, the mind is powerful. And if we don't let those intrusive thoughts happen, I think that it really does change the outlook on how we live life and how sick we actually feel, I don't know if that makes sense, but.
No, it does make sense. And it's interesting you say that. I don't want to take any more time. The mind is a powerful thing. And my wife used to, and still does, say that if you think you're going to get better, that's the first step in getting better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you don't think you're going to get better and you start going down that negative thought trail, then I'm not so sure that whatever goes on inside your body does not respond in a positive way, but goes down the negative path. Right. So I think you're right on with that. Summer, you've been great.
You've been great too, Ron. Thank you so much. If you or someone you know has been diagnosed with bladder cancer, Bladder Cancer Canada is here to help with support programs, informative resources, and educational sessions. Visit us at bladdercancercanada.org to access these resources and to share your story. Be sure to follow us on X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We will respond to messages sent on socials. If you are a bladder cancer patient or survivor and would like to share your story on the podcast, please contact us at info@bladdercancercanada.org.